The kitchen smelled faintly of onions and soap as I wiped down the counter one last time. The clock above the stove inched toward 11, its ticking filling the quiet house. Caleb had gone to bed early, led down the hallway by Serena with her usual gentle smile. I told myself he would be safe in her care. That was the rhythm of our nights now, me finishing up in the kitchen, Serena guiding him to rest, the house settling into silence. The sudden knock on the front door split the air like a crack of thunder. My rag slipped from my hand, landing in the sink with a splash. No one knocked at this hour. My chest tightened as I walked to the door, each step echoing on the hardwood. When I opened it, Mrs. Keaton stood there, breathless, clutching her cardigan with one hand as though it were armor. "Lorraine," she said, her voice sharp and uneven. "I hear him. Your son. I hear Caleb screaming at night. Around 2 in the morning, crying, calling out." I froze in the doorway. "That's not possible," I managed, my voice too loud, as though volume could make her words untrue. "Caleb sleeps soundly. Serena tucks him in and stays with him until he drifts off. He doesn't wake like that." Mrs. Keaton's eyes were steady, almost sorrowful. "I wouldn't come here if I weren't certain. I've heard him more than once. Lorraine, it's not just crying, it's screaming." The porch light hummed above us, its glow catching the silver in her hair. My throat felt dry, my palms damp. Behind me, the house was still, as if holding its breath. I wanted to dismiss her, to shut the door and retreat to the kitchen where everything made sense. But her words clung to me, scraping at something deep inside. I thanked her stiffly, though my voice trembled, and closed the door, leaning against it. I listened to the silence of my own home, trying to convince myself she was mistaken. Caleb always slept. Serena always said so. Yet as I returned to the kitchen, the tick of the clock felt heavier, each second pressing against me, pulling me into a night I could no longer trust. The next morning, I studied Caleb more closely than I ever had. His shirt sleeves were smudged with dirt, as though he had been on the ground outside when he shifted in his chair. Crumbs scattered from his pocket onto the kitchen floor. His hands shook as he reached for his glass of water, and his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to disappear into himself. "Just restless," Serena said from the sink, her voice calm, her smile too easy. "He wakes sometimes, wanders a little. Nothing to worry about." She glanced at me with that practiced gentleness, as if her reassurance should have been enough to quiet any doubt. But doubt clung to me all the same. Caleb kept his gaze lowered, avoiding my eyes the way he never used to. My mind pulled me back to the boy who once filled our little garden with laughter, chasing butterflies until he fell breathless in the grass. Even as he grew into a man, his innocence never left him. He still sought comfort in holding my hand, still clutched his worn stuffed bear when the nights felt too long. That same boy now sat silent at the table, his lips pressed together, his spirit dimmed. I reached to touch his hand, but he shifted away, pulling it into his lap. The rejection cut deep, not because of pride, but because fear had replaced trust in his eyes. Something had changed, and I couldn't yet name it. That evening, after dinner, Serena carried in 2 mugs of coffee. "For you, Mom," she said lightly, placing one before me. The rich scent drifted upward. I hesitated only a second before sipping, grateful for the warmth. We talked a little about groceries, about the weather. Nothing of consequence. Later, I laid down in bed, the house wrapped in silence. I meant to stay alert, to listen for the faintest sound, but my eyelids grew heavy, my body sinking deeper than it should have. The last thing I remembered was the clock's steady tick before everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight streamed through the curtains, and the night had slipped away without me. The days slipped by with a heavy sameness, Serena still placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of me each evening, her smile polished, her voice sweet. I kept drinking, until one morning as I gathered the trash, something sharp caught against my hand. I pulled out a blister pack wedged between crumpled paper towels. Several of the compartments were empty, the small plastic pressed flat where pills had once been. My stomach tightened. These weren't medications I recognized. Holding the pack, I called out to Serena, who was folding clothes in the living room. "Do you know anything about this?" She glanced at it, then shrugged lightly, as if it were nothing at all. "A friend left them. I must have thrown them out without thinking." Her tone was smooth, but her eyes flickered just for an instant with something harder. I forced a nod, setting the blister pack on the counter before sweeping it into the trash. "I see," I murmured, pretending the explanation was enough. But that night, when Serena set down my mug with the same easy smile, I lifted it to my lips only after she turned away. As soon as she left the kitchen, I poured the contents quietly into the sink. From that day on, I never drank her coffee again. I pretended, always pretending, but I stayed alert. The first few nights I heard nothing, only the hum of the refrigerator, the ceiling fan's creak, the sigh of the wind through the trees. Still, I forced my eyes open, nails pressing into my palms whenever fatigue threatened to drag me down. Then one night, close to 2 a.m, a sound slipped through the quiet, a faint metallic scrape, like the lid of the trash can outside being nudged. My heart raced. I rose from bed, careful not to let the floorboards groan beneath me. In the stillness, I caught it muffled sobs, raw and broken, threading through the night air. And then Caleb's voice, shaking, almost swallowed by the dark. "Mom, please." I gripped the doorframe, every muscle in my body rigid, as if my own breath might shatter the moment. The scrape outside faded into silence, but another sound took its place. Light footsteps, careful, deliberate, moving down the hallway. I pressed myself against the wall, phone in my hand, the camera already recording. Though my grip trembled so badly I feared I'd drop it. The glow of a small flashlight cut across the floor, sliding beneath Caleb's door. Serena moved like she had done this before, slipping inside with practiced ease. I edged closer, holding my breath. Through the narrow crack left in the doorframe, I saw her bend toward my son. Her voice came out low and sharp, every word a blade. "Your mother doesn't love you, Caleb. She only keeps you here for the checks. This house will be mine soon. If you say a word, she will die." My body jolted at the sound of it, rage crashing into me like a storm. I wanted to throw the door wide, to drag her away from him with my bare hands. But Caleb's whimper held me still. He clutched his stuffed bear, his whole body curling around it as though it were the only shield he had left. His sobs were muffled, but each one reached me, cutting deeper than any wound could. Serena leaned closer, the flashlight beam catching Caleb's damp cheeks. "Do you understand? Stay quiet. Obey me, or you'll lose her." The words were venom, steady and cruel. I pressed my phone tighter, angling it just enough to catch her face, her voice, the cold certainty behind her threats. My palms were slick, my chest heaving as I forced myself to remain hidden. Proof, that was what I needed. Not anger, not impulse. Evidence. Caleb rocked back and forth, whispering broken pleas. My son, my gentle boy, reduced to trembling silence, while the woman who vowed to care for him used fear as her weapon. When she finally stepped back, her shadow slid across the wall and the door clicked shut behind her. I stumbled away from the hallway, clutching my phone to my chest, the recording still running, every muscle in my body shaking with the weight of what I had just witnessed. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp burning low, a notebook open in front of me. My hand shook as I wrote down every detail. The exact time I heard the footsteps, the scrape of the trash can, the words Serena used to break my son's spirit. I replayed the recording over and over, each threat slicing into me until I thought my chest would split. Still, I kept writing. Every detail mattered. Every line on the page felt like armor I was forging in the dark. By dawn, my eyes burned and my hand ached. But I had filled several pages. The house stirred, the floor creaking softly under Caleb's steps. When he came into the kitchen, his shirt collar was stiff with dried tears. He held his bear tightly under one arm, his shoulders hunched. I touched the fabric at his neck and my voice faltered. "Caleb," I whispered. His eyes, red-rimmed and fearful, lifted to mine. "Mom, don't leave me," he said, the words so faint I almost missed them. The plea cracked something inside me. I pulled him close, feeling the stiffness in his body, the fear that kept him from melting into my arms like he once did. I pressed my cheek against his hair and swore silently that I would never fail him again. That afternoon, I walked across the street and knocked on Mrs. Keaton's door. When I told her what I had seen and heard, her face went pale. "Lorraine," she said firmly, "I'll stand with you. I've heard him too. I'll say it under oath." Her promise steadied me. Her conviction a small flame in the chill that had settled around my home. Later, I sat with the phone in my hand, staring at a number I hadn't dialed in years. Graham Ortiz, my late husband's old friend and a lawyer who had earned respect in every corner of this town. My voice shook when he answered, but I told him everything about the coffee, the pills, the threats, the recording. His reply was measured but grave. "Lorraine, bring me everything. We'll build the case." For the first time in months, I felt a weapon forming in my hands, one strong enough to cut through the shadows Serena had laid over my house. By the time the officers stepped into my living room, Graham at my side. My palms were damp with sweat. Serena was standing by the couch, folding laundry into neat stacks, humming under her breath. She looked up at us with a smile so soft it almost made me question what I knew. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, tilting her head like an innocent child. Graham didn't waste time. He pressed play on his phone, and the room filled with her voice, low, venomous, unmistakable. "Your mother doesn't love you. If you tell anyone, she'll die." The words echoed against the walls, stealing the air from my chest. Serena's face drained of color. The folded shirt slipped from her hands. "That's not," she stammered, her gaze darting to the officers. "It's taken out of context. I was under stress. You don't understand the pressure I've been under." Her voice rose, wild edges cracking through her calm. She launched into excuses, rambling about her parents, how they had pushed her into financial schemes, how she had no choice but to lean on Caleb's disability checks. Each word tangled into the next, a desperate net she couldn't climb out of. From the corner of the room came the sound that broke me most. Caleb, knees pulled to his chest, rocking back and forth. His sobs tore through the air, raw and sharp, as if every sound confirmed what he had endured alone in the night. I moved to him, pulling him into my arms, whispering his name. He clung to me like a lifeline. The officers exchanged glances, their faces unreadable but heavy with recognition. One of them began scribbling notes while the other stepped forward, his tone measured but firm. "Mrs. Ortiz," he said, addressing Serena, "we'll need you to come with us." Serena shook her head violently, her composure slipping further with every second. The sweet daughter-in-law act had shattered, leaving only panic and anger beneath. I tightened my hold on Caleb, feeling the tremor of his body against mine. The mask Serena had worn for so long was gone, and there was no turning back. Weeks bled into each other until the day finally arrived. The courthouse steps felt heavier than stone as I climbed them with Graham by my side. The folder in my hands, stuffed with photos, notes, and recordings, felt both like a burden and a shield. When we entered the courtroom, whispers rippled across the benches. Neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers had come to see what truth would surface. I sat at the plaintiff's table, heart hammering, and forced myself to breathe. Caleb was not there. I had insisted he be spared this sight. Across the room, Serena sat rigid, her hands folded too neatly in her lap. Her face was pale, but her eyes darted about, searching for sympathy that would not come. When the judge called the case, the air thickened. Graham's voice was steady as he introduced the evidence, his words deliberate. Then he pressed play. Serena's whisper, cruel and sharp, slithered through the speakers. "Your mother doesn't love you. If you tell anyone, she'll die." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the shifting of a single shoe against the tile floor. Serena's lips moved, but no words came until she finally stammered, "I never meant any harm. I was under pressure. I was just overwhelmed." Her voice trembled, as if fragility could erase the venom we had all heard. Then Mrs. Keaton took the stand. She spoke with the firmness of someone who had nothing to lose. She told the court how she had heard Caleb's cries night after night, how she had seen him digging through the trash, trembling and desperate. Each word she spoke struck like a bell tolling the truth. The judge leaned forward, eyes grave. When his gavel finally struck, his words cut through the stillness. Serena was guilty of psychological abuse and attempted fraud in her pursuit of guardianship over Caleb's benefits. She would lose every legal right connected to him. The weight in my chest eased, if only slightly. Around me, people whispered, some in relief, others in shock. Graham placed a hand over mine, steady and grounding. I closed my eyes, drawing in a breath that felt like the first one in years. The verdict was clear, but what lay ahead for Caleb was still uncertain. The courthouse victory did not end the shadows in our home. They lingered in Caleb's eyes, in the way he startled at sudden noises, in the restless shifting of his body at night. That was why, just days after the verdict, I found myself walking into Dr. Alvarez's office with Caleb's hand clamped tightly around mine. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and crayons. Caleb pressed himself against me, his face half hidden behind his stuffed bear. When Dr. Alvarez greeted us, his voice was calm, even like water smoothing stone, but Caleb refused to meet his eyes, burying his head into my arm. The first sessions were heavy with silence. Caleb would not speak, not even when asked simple questions. So Dr. Alvarez gave him paper and colored pencils, inviting him to draw instead. At first, the pages filled with dark smudges and jagged lines, as if his fear had found shape in black graphite. I sat beside him, helpless but steady, waiting. Days turned into weeks, and one afternoon he slid a picture across the table. It was rough, drawn with the uneven hand of a boy still learning to trust himself, but I knew what it was. Two figures stood under a wide yellow sun, hands clasped, smiling. One was me, the other him. The sight unraveled me. Tears came, quiet but unstoppable, spilling as I touched the paper. Caleb peeked up at me, uncertain, until I kissed the top of his head and whispered, "I'm right here." That picture became more than a drawing. It was proof that some light had survived. Still, nights told another story. I would wake to his murmurs, broken words spilling from dreams he couldn't escape. Sometimes he whimpered. Sometimes he called out for me. As if still trapped in Serena's whispered threats, I would hold him until the tremors eased, rocking him like I had when he was small. Healing was possible. I could see it in his drawings, in the small flicker of trust returning to his smile. But scars do not fade overnight, and as I watched him sleep, I knew our path forward would be long. The church hall smelled faintly of soup and candle wax, filled with the quiet shuffle of volunteers moving between tables. I had signed up for the outreach program because I wanted Caleb to see something beyond the four walls of our house and his memories. He sat beside me, still hesitant around crowds but no longer hiding behind my arm. That's when I noticed her. A small girl, no older than 7, standing near the back with a threadbare doll clutched against her chest. Her hair was tangled, her shoes 2 sizes too large. She didn't speak to anyone until her eyes met mine. Then, as if courage had been waiting for that moment, she walked forward and whispered, "Can I come with you?" Her words rooted me to the spot. I saw, in her trembling hands and wide eyes, the reflection of myself years ago alone with Caleb, trying to fight a world that didn't care. The ache in my chest deepened when I learned her name was Miranda, and that she had lost both parents in an accident. I hesitated. I was older now, with scars of my own, and I wondered if I had the strength to raise another child. But when I looked at Caleb, I saw something stir in him too. A recognition, a longing he couldn't yet name. That night, after we returned home, I filled out the first of the adoption forms. My hand shook, but it felt right. Weeks later, when Miranda came to visit, Caleb stayed back at first, shy and uncertain. He hovered at the edge of the living room while Miranda sat cross-legged on the rug, doll in her lap. Then, without warning, he crossed the room, wrapped his arms around her, and said one word, "I will never forget, sister." The sound of it filled the house like sunlight. For the first time in months, laughter returned, not tentative or forced, but bubbling and shared, spilling from both children as if the walls themselves exhaled relief. I watched them, my heart stretched wider than I thought it could go, knowing we had stepped onto a new path neither of us could walk alone. The evenings became my favorite part of the day. I would sit on the porch, the wood warm beneath me, and watch Caleb and Miranda running across the yard. Their laughter carried through the air, light and unburdened, a sound I once thought I might never hear again. The old house behind me, once a place where shadows hid in the corners, now stood steady, its windows glowing with safety instead of secrecy. The sun sank low, painting the horizon in fading gold. Caleb darted toward me, his hair damp with sweat, his breath uneven from chasing Miranda. He leaned against my knee, cheeks flushed but smiling wide. Then he whispered, almost as if it were a secret he was giving me to keep Mom, "I'm not scared anymore." The words unraveled something deep inside me. I pulled him close, burying my face in his hair, letting myself believe that the nights of terror had finally loosened their grip. His heart beat steady against mine, no longer thundering from fear but quickening with play. Before I could let go, Miranda came tumbling into my lap, her doll bouncing to the ground as she giggled. She wrapped her arms around both of us, fitting herself into the circle of safety as though she had always belonged. Caleb's arms slipped around her shoulders, and for a moment, the 3 of us sat there tangled together, breathing the same calm evening air. I looked at them, 2 children who had seen more pain than most adults and felt the weight of every step that had led us here. There had been betrayal, whispers in the dark, nights I thought might never end. But here, now, I saw proof that love could stitch together what cruelty had tried to tear apart. The porch creaked softly beneath us as I rocked them both, my arms unwilling to let go. I whispered, barely loud enough for myself to hear, "This home will be built on love, not fear, above us." The last light faded into dusk, and I held on, knowing that tomorrow would begin with laughter instead of silence.